fans? Welcome back to 237, back with another review. As I continue my month of October run through of Stephen King film adaptations. And for this one, we're going back to the 80s, early 80s, probably one of the earliest Stephen King adaptations. And one that is a major title. It's one that should put the name King in anyone's mind as soon as they hear it. Uh, I think of it as a quintessential Stephen King title. Uh, I have read the book, but I was very young. I don't remember too much about it. But it's another one that came out in 1983, one of three films. There was Dead Zone, Christine, and then Cujo, which actually this came out before Christine, but still 1983. And yeah, I do hate this cover. I mean, it makes it look more like the Beast from Sandlot, but and I know there's a newer release by Screen Factory. I am okay with this because I like the features on it. It does have a good making of documentary, but I would like to have a DVD or Blu-ray with that original cover on it that you saw in the thumbnail, just with that house in the background, the white picket fence with the bloody letters. Excuse me. That's actually one of my favorite posters of a Stephen King film. Of course, it's based on the 1981 novel of the same name, which, oddly enough, nowadays Stephen King seems to love and praise every adaptation that's made. I mean, he even loves Dreamcatcher and Cell. But back around this time, he was kind of picky. I mean, he felt that there was something lacking in every adaptation, not nearly to the level of The Shining, which he absolutely hated and disowned. But here, this was the first time where he was actually unhappy with his own work. Uh, he had always said if there was one book he could rewrite, it'd be Cujo. It took him some 4 years to write, which I think for King is a long time. And it was also peak alcoholism, and he had said he doesn't remember the writing process whatsoever. But he's always hated the ending to this, which is very bleak. It is very dark. It is considered one of his most dark works. I mean, Pet Sematary is pretty bleak too. But so he was given the opportunity to, rewrite the ending with a screenplay draft, which was not used, but the ending that he changed was used, or at least the direction for the ending was used for this. Now, it was directed by, the original director, Peter Madak, left 2 days into filming along with the director of photography, but then Louis Teague came in as director along with Jan de Bont as director of photography. And the final screenplay was actually written by Don Carlos Dunaway and Barbara Turner. And it stars Dee Wallace, the mom of the 80s. I love Dee Wallace. One of the best horror heroines of the 80s. And to me, when I think of 80s moms, Dee Wallace. I mean, this, E.T., she had just done E.T., Daniel Hugh Kelly, Ed Lauder, Christopher Stone, who was actually Dee Wallace's husband at the time and up until his death in the 90s. And as 6-year-old Tad was Danny Pintaro, which I believe this was his first film. Jan de Bont did a cinematography, which is really good. And there is a lot of cool tricks that they do with this. And Charles Bernstein did the score, which if I'm not mistaken, he did a few scores that I really like. I think he did. Nope, he did. For some reason, I thought he did. Oh, no, I know who that is. He did Nightmare on Elm Street, April Fool's Day, The Entity. That's where I know him from, which is a great score as well. Made for 6 million, grossed 21.2, so it was a decent hit, and released 4 months before Christine. Now, because of the ending change, I've heard people say they hate it because it changed the ending, or they liked it because of this ending. Now, I actually remember not the first time I saw it, but the first time I saw anything about it. So, of course, the first time I heard of Cujo was when I saw the original hardcover. But I was probably 8 or 9 when the Sci-Fi Channel was showing it, which was the first time I saw it. They showed part one night, then two the next night, and I was waiting for part two to come on. I put it on Sci-Fi, and it was the last scene of Cujo when Dee Wallace is holding Tad, and then Cujo just comes running in. I was like, wow. Now, I don't remember if I saw this on rental or cable the very first time I saw it, but this is one that I've grown to appreciate over time because I, for some reason, when I was younger, I always thought, okay, the whole movie is mom, son, trapped in a broken down Pinto with a rabid Saint Bernard outside, and there's no one coming for help. They can't get out. It's hot as hell. They're trapped, and this mean ass Saint Bernard is trying to get to them. But then every time I went to go watch it, because I've seen this a handful of times, I forget that that's really just the second half of the film. I mean, they don't even get to the farm with rabid Cujo really until the halfway point. I kind of forgot how long they spent on the family's story to set everything up. Which, so like, when I was younger, I thought it was too slow. I thought it took too long to get to the point. Now I really appreciate all that, and I think it works to the movie's favor. Because if this was just a movie about any ordinary family, we probably wouldn't give a shit. But it does a good job at just showing this family with problems. I mean, fear plays a big role in this film. I mean, we have the father, played by Daniel Hugh Kelly, who has fears of professional and financial problems or ruin. We have Dee Wallace, who has fears of growing old, not being beautiful, kind of becoming not really helpless, but worthless, I guess, which leads to her having an affair. Also, the dad, there's some sort of, not really a scandal, but, like a recall on this serial project that he was involved with. So there's that, there's her affair, causes tension, and at the center of that is their 6-year-old son, Tad, who has a fear of monsters. And really just a fear of this monster in his closet, which hints is some kind of beast with like yellow eyes and fangs and breathes heavy. It sets all that up, and it does a good job at setting up really everything else around it, why there's no help, and, why the husband has to leave his business trip early, and really creates this, these familial problems, so that when the lethal problem comes in, or the lethal threat and crisis comes in, and they overcome it, it puts other fears into perspective and they grow as a family. At least that's what I've always got from it. And we do get snippets of Cujo throughout. And I thought it was a great idea to open this movie like a Disney film. It really does feel like an older Disney film, like Milo and Otis or Homeward Bound. I don't know if they're Disney, but something like that, where you have the playful Saint Bernard chasing the rabbit, chases him around. And even in the score, which Charles Bernstein said he was going for like a Jaws, like in Jaws, it was like the organ. dun, dun. Here's the French horns. He set that up more lightly in the beginning when you just get the shot of Cujo stepping into frame, so that as he gets more rabid, those notes get heavier, which I thought was awesome. And we kind of see him becoming more rabid as the film goes on. We always cut back to that family, the son of which, of the family that owns Cujo, he was in Bloody Birthday. Billy Jacoby. He played Kurt, I think his name was. He was the kid with glasses in a Bloody Birthday. And, he gets bit on the nose by a bat, gets rabies. And really, we just kind of see this family dealing with their issues. The son fearing monsters, really looking up to his dad. Dad finding out about this affair while dealing with all these problems at work. Dee Wallace dealing with losing her looks, not being seen as beautiful, growing old, having an affair with a good friend of the husband. Again, played by Christopher Stone, who is Dee Wallace's real-life husband. And this Pinto that keeps having problems, so they have to go to, this backyard mechanic, which the idea for the book came from, a day in 77 when King was having problems with his motorcycle. A friend told him about this guy that does good work out of his house. So he showed up, and this big St. Bernard came outside. And he thought, what if someone was trapped in this situation and it was a car that kind of protected them instead of a bike like I'm on? And so that's where he got the idea. And really, it's the halfway point when the husband goes away on the business trip. They go to get the Pinto fixed. And at this point, it shows that the family that owns Cujo, the mother had won the lottery, takes the son away for a week. The dad was planning like a debaucherous Vegas trip with his friend and neighbor, but Cujo had gone rabid, went over, killed the neighbor. He went over to go pick up his friend, his neighbor friend, saw him dead. Cujo killed him. So nobody's home. Oh, and also it shows that they had canceled the mail till they get back, so no mailman's coming to help them. So it really sets everything up for why there's no help coming, why no one knows where they are. But we're also kind of rooting for them because it is this family with all these issues. And like when he left for the business trip, they left on bad terms. And, you actually care about them. You want them to be reunited as a family again, alive. Also, when the husband's away on the business trip and he keeps calling the house and no one answers, in any movie where, there wasn't any problems, he would think, oh, something's wrong, no one's answering. But here, there's the possibility that she's seeing somebody else, even though she said it was over. So it just kind of prolongs everything. That's why he doesn't leave right away. So it does a good job at setting everything up and really fleshing out and developing these characters so that we do give a shit when we get to the actual Cujo half of the film. So yeah, there's some cool stuff with the cameras. One of the first scenes when Tad is doing that thing I think every kid has done, when you try to turn off the light and run to the bed as fast as you can. We see how the room is set up, but when he flicks the light off, it's an elongated set to kind of show the mind of a child, how your imagination will kind of do that. It's like he runs towards the camera, then he runs under it, then it like goes upside down as he dives into the bed. That's cool. Right before Cujo's family, when the mother and son leave, the son goes out to find Cujo, and it's this great scene out in the fog where like The music's very uh, subtle and unsettling. And by this point, he's really getting dirty and foamy, and he just approaches him from the fog. And this is like the last scene where Cujo kind of has a, a rationale. Because he's growling, the kid's like, "It's me, Cujo, it's me." And that's when he decides to walk away deeper into the fog. I love how that fog scene is shot. It looks great. Now, the book, I know, switches POVs. And even at one point, or at several points, you kind of get in the head of Cujo, where he wants to be a good dog. He can't help himself. He doesn't know what he's afflicted with. This kind of just shows a rabid dog. It kind of takes away the character, but at the same time, they do give him personality. I mean, there's scenes like where he's just laying in front of the barn. You kind of just see him snarling as he's just watching them. Or, we hear the boy call him a smart dog earlier on in the film, so he's good at kind of tricking, or not really trapping, but kind of, excuse me, being able to tell where people are going to go so he can get them. Also in the book, and what a lot of people might forget, or one thing that's very different about it, is this was like the first one to have no supernatural elements. Now, it does hint that the monster in Tad's closet is the reincarnated child killer or pedophile from the Dead Zone. And then I think something about Cujo himself. Or that Cujo is the reincarnation, one or the other, but still has rabies. The movie does away with all that. And that's one of the reasons why it is one of my favorite adaptations. Well, it is one of my favorite adaptations, as different as it is, but one of my favorite Stephen King films. Because I do like ones that are not supernatural. I'm glad that they can just do a trapped with a rabid dog story and not make it, oh, it's actually the ghost of someone else, or it's tied to some supernatural whatever. I'm glad they stripped all that. Apparently they had like anywhere between 4 to 7 or 8 different dogs. At one point there was even like a black lab, Great Dane mix or something, wearing a St. Bernard suit. They did end up using that footage. But there is footage of a guy in a St. Bernard suit when he runs and charges into the car, which doesn't look as hokey as it sounds. The director really did have an eye for good shots, and then also the editor, Neil Travis, he really made all that work as well. And they did do a good job at going against your expectations. Like when Dee Wallace first pulls up in the Pinto and she goes to undo Tad's seatbelt. Her door's wide open. She's kind of like one leg out. She's trying to undo his seatbelt. And the camera starts in the barn, like a POV shot of Cujo for the barn. Then kind of showing like he's coming up from behind her over to the open door. But then he comes up the passenger window on the other side. So it does set up its jump scares well. It's not a bloody film. It's more. I mean, just the idea of being mauled and torn apart by a dog is vicious enough without having to be gory and bloody everywhere. Which really the only attack we see, I think, is that of the neighbor. Because when Cujo's owner is killed, we just sort of hear the growls from outside the house. And then later a police officer shows up. And I think we see him lunge, but then we cut to the outside of the barn. But there's also this part when Dee Wallace gets bit, when he's able to get through the door. Then as she's kind of sitting there, almost passing out, Tad's in the backseat crying. The camera does this thing where it like spins, it'll stop on her, spin, kind of stop on Tad. Again but faster, until it's eventually to just showing that like the whole world is just so much going on. She's bit. There's no help. He's crying. I do have to say, uh, Danny Pintora as Tad, excellent child actor. I mean, again, I think this was his first movie. Yeah, the sound of his voice or his screams could kind of get annoying after a while, or how he keeps repeating like I want my daddy or I want to go home as he's crying and screaming. It can get annoying, but every time he screams or he's crying, I bought it. I mean, he looks terrified. He 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 really sold his fear in this, and he did a great job. And also the scenes when he's having the seizure from dehydration, he actually does bite her fingers because he used to have seizures, so he knew what that was like. But another thing that's highly commendable is the both the set design, the cinematography, and the atmosphere. Because of course it's supposed to take place in Castle Rock, Maine, but it was shot in California in the winter. Now, so it was dropping to the 40s. It was constantly raining. They were shooting in between rain. Dee Wallace is in a dress and a tank top. Tad is in just a small pair of shorts the whole time. And so it's winter, constantly raining, but you can literally feel the heat coming off the TV. I mean, they look like they are just in a dry summer in just a hot car. I mean, I never would have guessed that this was shot sometime in the winter during nonstop rain. It does not look that way at all. So they really sold the environment and the atmosphere very well. And they both look, I mean, they had to keep spritzing them with fake sweat to make them look hot and dehydrated, but they definitely look hot and dehydrated. And again, it just looks dry as hell, like a dry Indian summer. But they were able to shoot in the winter and make it look hot, so it definitely worked. And I guess the trainer was trying to convince them to make it like a Doberman or a Rottweiler, because you can actually train them to do stuff. St. Bernards aren't really trainable to do this, apparently. And they're just too naturally friendly and big and dopey, and more helpers than like train them to do stuff. But the producers like, no. I mean, Cujo's a Saint Bernard. We will make it work with a Saint Bernard, and they do a good job at just making him look like a mean, scary dog. I mean, one of the biggest pitfalls this movie could have had is having one of the most lovable breeds possible, and just one of the biggest teddy bears of a dog breed, and making it look scary. And I mean, when he's covered in mud and blood, he's got the yellow gunk coming out of his eyes, and the foam just matted into his, his snout. And like when he's just sitting there staring, or his lips quivering, and he's growling, he looks terrified. And when they actually do get him to like claw out the window and try to shove his head through the window, it's convincing. They made a Saint Bernard look convincingly mean. So yeah, spoilers for the ending for anyone that doesn't know, but the book is very cynical, and there are several parts where there'll be something happy, like then it's just followed by something really depressing. But this is definitely one of my favorite Stephen King movies, and I know adaptation-wise, it's very different from the book. But in this case, I would say it's for the better, because the writer really had an issue with the ending. And it's not like he really... It's not like there's a dramatically different ending. It just kind of changed one thing, and then it ends. it doesn't go as far as the book does. But I mean, the cinematography is great. There's a lot of like great tracking shots or just really cool things they do with the camera to make it more visually interesting. Again, you buy that this kid is terrified and scared. You buy that this dog is rabid and mean and wants to kill. You buy that they are dying of heat and dehydration in this hot ass car. Would never guess that it's actually a wet winter, freezing winter. So, yeah, a lot works for this film. And again, if you haven't seen it, but you're finding the first half a bit slow, stick with it. Because the character development and the pacing of that first half really does make everything worth it. And you really do care about the characters and the dad that's not there, but trying to call and realizes something's wrong. If, like I said, if it had just been a family with no issues where in the beginning they just leave, go, get stuck, you probably wouldn't give a shit. So, making this a slow burn, focusing on character development before it gets to the horror, definitely works in its favor. So, when I was a kid, it was something I had a problem with, but now I really do appreciate. So, now getting to the spoiler of an ending. In the book, the kid dies, and that was the thing that King had a problem with. Now, you could say that Pet Sematary goes to some darker places, but I guess just this whole thing of, especially in the movie, where you have this movie about survival and then a family being reunited, but then the kid dies. King hated it even after it was published. The producers thought it wouldn't work. So they do make the kid live. Now, it doesn't go on like the book does about how Cujo was cremated and just sent to the dump and all of that. It just ends with the dad showing up at that. He realizes that's where they have to be. So he goes to check it out, and she just exits the house with him in her arms. They embrace, freeze frame credits. But yeah, I mean, there's a few scenes where, like, when the cop shows up, because the dad senses something's wrong, which I always laugh at the one line by his friend when he's like, "Look, no one's called," and she told me before I left that no one's answering, and she just told me that she's been having an affair, and his work partner, his best friend, is just like, "Look, I'm sure it's okay. She's probably just staying with a friend." Oh my god, I can't believe I just said that. But it's funnier when he says it. And of course, the boyfriend, the one she's having the affair with, gets mad that it's over, trashes the house. They arrest him, but he doesn't know where they are. He decides to check out the house where he sent her to get the Pinto fixed. Because another thing it does, it kind of shows how rabies works. Because he does try to call that family a few times just to see if she stopped by. Of course, everyone's dead or gone. But, supposedly with rabies, every noise, sounds like an explosion in your head. So some scenes when Cujo is just headbutting the car, ramming the car, scratching the windows, trying to get in, is when the phone's ringing. It's driving him nuts. And there's nothing they can do, and he won't stop until the phone stops. And the dad is just calling this phone nonstop. So, I mean, it does a good job at setting everything up and its execution. And then the way Cujo just, runs towards the window to grab the phone. And, when he rolls off the car, he just kind of rolls. But eventually, they send a cop. Of course, the cop gets out of the car. He's attacked by Cujo. And then that's when Dee Wallace decides to fight back. She picks up this bat. And there is a look that Cujo gives. I think she hits him. We don't ever see the connect, but, you know, stylistically we see it's implied that she struck him with the bat. He like rolls, and when he gets up, he's got like this, like he's looking through his dog eyebrows and he's snarling. It looks like the meanest dog. But, he goes. She even breaks the bat over him. He goes to jump on her, and she just stabs him. And he's like resting his head on her chest. She brings Tad inside, pours water on him in his mouth, which I guess was actually hot water because the house was freezing. He comes to life, and then in slow motion, when the music swells up, and she's holding him, that's just when Cujo just comes around the kitchen table, lunges at her. It does like that action movie, like vroom, vroom, vroom. And she's with the cop's pistol. And then that's when the dad shows up, they embrace. So, yeah, it doesn't go on into like a epilogue territory like the book does. It just ends. And they chose to end it at the moment of embrace, as if to show, okay, the lethal threat is over, and they can now get back together as a family. Because now all their other fears and problems are put into perspective after this ordeal. So again, without repeating everything I've already said, I have always liked this film. Yeah, I might have thought it was a little slow or took too long, but now it's one I really appreciate. It has a great child actor who's very convincing. They did a great job with the St. Bernards and really making him look mean and vicious. And Dee Wallace is great as a mom. And I guess this was just one of her most deepest like mother roles. Because like the part where she just yells, "All right, I'll get your daddy." Just like that moment when a parent just gives up. And just gives in to their kid. It's a pretty powerful film. I mean, there is more to it than just, Killer St. Bernard. Even though that half is the best half, but it wouldn't be as good without the slower first half. So that was the last one I had, the last of the three that I had left from 1983. I do have a few more to get to, and I'll pick up more as October goes along. But that is Stephen King's Cujo. I thank you for watching.